Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this morning, we are going to talk about low confidence in American universities. Students have been expressing their cynicism about, going to college, about going to universities in America. And for a long time, this has been happening because for a long time, American universities are nothing but major corporations, and they are tethered to the market, market capitalism, in which you pay to get what you need, right? So it's not about really educating your children. It's about training them for a particular job, a particular task that they will do after they have graduated. Many students realize that after they've graduated, they only are not qualified to get a job in their field. Well, not say that they're qualified, but they do not have that, opportunity to get a job within their field, but also that they are sometimes not equipped with the skills that they need um, to be able to operate in a particular field of career, right? In a particular career choice. Now, that is something that we have to examine. Now, this morning, I want to show you something from the Gallup poll that was done last year. Let me see if I can share my screen, open up my screen here, and share that information with you as quickly as possible so we can end the video as quickly as possible. Um, Let me pull it up. Where is it? Okay, so we have here, this is from the Gallup poll, the Gallup News, right? Americans' confidence in higher education down sharply. And this was written by Megan Brennan, right? The reading's sort of pale, so please be very patient with me. So we have here, Americans' confidence in higher education has fallen to 36%, sharply down or lower than in two prior readings in 2015, 57%, and 2018, 48%. That's a really high percentage. In addition to the 17% of US adults who have a great deal and 19%, quite a lot of confidence, 40% have some, and 22% very little confidence. And we can see here the graph, right, from 2015 down all the way to 2023. In 2015, majorities of Americans in all key subgroups expressed confidence in higher education, with one exception, independence, 48%. By 2018, though, confidence had fallen across all groups, with the largest drop, 17 percentage points among Republicans. In the latest measure, confidence once again fell across the board, but Republicans sank the most, 20 points to 19%, the lowest of any group. Confidence among adults without a college degree and those aged 55 and older dropped nearly as much as Republicans since 2018, right? So something that you have to think about. Some people are thinking that the low confidence is just demonstrated among Ivy League schools. No, but that has been going on for years. And also, there are other schools, right? The public universities in America where people have been talking about, the fact that their students are not, being educated in the way that they would want them to be educated in. They're not being empowered. Their minds are not being enlightened. And so often when I speak to people, you can see that. And as someone who has taught in the system, I understand that the system is geared towards graduation and getting students out and, receiving money, because it's all about receiving money and getting research funding. And research funding oftentimes is tethered to a particular narrative that that foundation, that particular corporation desires that the universities adheres to and research about, in terms of information, research, relevant information about, not information not relevant to you or to me, but relevant to that particular foundation and its ethos, its values. something that we have to think about. So the university is not a dispassionate place. It's not a place where you go and you can have free discourse in terms of expressing dissent, because that is where you should have. University should be a place where all ideas contend and all sort of philosophies clash. But right now, I think that we're in a crisis where, first of all, we took the Bible out of the schools. Now, the Bible is a very important book, and we know that it's a bestseller. Since the Bible has been published in the 15th century, it has always been the bestseller, the #1 best-selling book in the world. No other book has ever outmatched that book. And yet still, that book is not read in schools. Why? And I'm not suggesting here that, you have to read it to be converted and the school has to go on a conversion exercise, right? But the fact of the matter is that the Bible should be a required book of reading, because that is how Western civilization came about. And the Protestant Reformation, which many Americans are still living in the Dark Age because they don't know anything about the Dark Ages and the Protestant Reformation. Very few Americans understand what that Reformation was about. Everybody's talking about, yeah, for sure, and and they're using these expressions and they really don't know what they're saying. And if you don't understand the Protestant Reformation, then you don't understand what is happening currently in US politics and what the US is doing around the world, trying as much as possible to achieve full spectrum dominance, right? You've got to understand what the Dark Ages was all about and how their ethos, the philosophy that was expressed in that period, is now being expressed and in some cases, some of the laws are being enacted right there in the United States, the home of the land of the brave and the home of the what is it again? The land of the free and the home of the brave. That expression just left me, right? So the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? I almost lost that expression, couldn't remember it. So yeah, that is what is happening in the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? We are seeing where freedom of speech is being suppressed, right? Freedom of speech is being restricted, and it's being restricted on campuses in which it should not be restricted. That's the place, that's the opportune place. That is the indispensable place that we should be having freedom of speech, so that students can see and be exposed to a wide swath of information and knowledge. But what we're seeing now, we are not allowed to disagree with any narrative that might be propagated by mainstream media or by the government, right? That is what is happening in the world at the moment. Now, let's look at the Biden broke his silence yesterday. Was it yesterday? I think, yes, it was yesterday, about what is happening. He spoke about what is happening on our college campuses. Let me see if I could close this window and have you look. So let me share, am I sharing my screen? No, let me share my screen with you so we can see what is happening. All right, so this is a speech given by Joe Biden. All right, so you can listen to it and see what he's saying here.
College campuses here. We've all seen the images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. Excuse me. First is the right to free speech, and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. Second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But neither are we a lawless country. We're a civil society. And order must prevail. Throughout our history, we've often faced moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation. Moments like this are always those who rush in to score political points. But this isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish a semester in their college education. Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree, the right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked. Let's be clear about this as well. There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for antisemitism or threats of violence against Jewish students. There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans. It's simply wrong. There's no place for racism in America. It's all wrong. It's un-American. I understand people have strong feelings and deep convictions. In America, we respect the right and protect the right for them to express that. But it doesn't mean anything goes. It needs to be done without violence, without destruction, without hate, and within the law. You know, make no mistake, as president, I will always defend free speech. And I will always be just as strong as standing up for the rule of law. That's my responsibility to you, the American people, my obligation to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Now, we must agree that a lot of what the president says is true or are true, and we cannot disagree with the comment, for example, that we should not have violent protests and protests that involve looting and creating mayhem, right? I don't think that that should be what any society should do, be it America or any society, any country in the world. What we cannot agree with is that Biden is suggesting, and the Democratic Party, and including the Republicans, also often say these values are un-American. And we know that America was founded violently on, it's a violent culture, and that the manner in which it came about, it used violence to achieve its goals. And we know that its military-industrial complex goes around the world creating violence. So we know that the United States has a culture of violence, and it has been, in the culture from its very existence. So to lie and to suggest that Americans or America does not practice violence is really, really disingenuous, because we do know that that is not true. And you can speak to the people in Latin America, you can speak to the people in Asia, you can just speak to the people in Africa, just any part of this globe where America's violence has wreaked havoc, untold havoc on these populations of people. And they will let you know that that is not so, that is mere hypocrisy, and we should call that out. But yes, we should support the president in terms of conditions should be created where, order is maintained. Now, there is not going to be always order, because once you're having protests, there are people who might, you'll find that it can be infiltrated. And there are individuals who might show up who you might not want to be there, and who may create disorder that you do not have any control over. So some of these things are things that we have to bear in mind. Sometimes even the feds might be involved in some of these protests. Who knows? The fact of the matter is, though, who is the person, or who are the persons behind these protest actions? This is what we want to know, because very important we understand. I do not think that the students at Columbia and at the University of California, among other universities in the United States, I do not think that they organized, particularly as they are attending classes. They really have a lot of time to just, you know, to really I would not say waste, right? But to spare. Let me use that word. They do have a lot of time to spare in order to, you know, mount those protest actions. But something that we need to ask ourselves, who are the major funders behind both sides, both as the AIPAC side, the Israeli side, and also the Palestinian side? Because make no bones about it, some people are involved, and money, lots of money, okay, are also involved in this sort of effort, right? This is nothing that the students have just come up with by themselves. Because remember now that even the professors and in some cases the administrations are involved, even though there's some level of hypocrisy that we see in the media where some people are suggesting that they are, you know, the government is, you know, acting hypocritically whilst the administration is trying to defend free speech and they're trying to defend the rights of Palestinians. But so often it is because they are playing their role. Right now in America, you do not know who is real, right? Almost everything is surreal and also is acting, right? It's not a part of the real world. We live in America right now, and in America, a world in general, where you do not know anything that you see with your eyes, you cannot trust. And I'm going to say this often on this show, on this channel, that you need to understand that. So people always sometimes reference me to what somebody says or what they see for me to think that I am going to change, it's going to change my behavior. But I do not think that way. I have not been trained to think that way. You've got to look at all the sources. And sometimes even when you have looked at all the sources that are available to you, you still do not know what is what. But it's very important that you be cynical about what is happening in the world. You cannot trust anything you hear or anything you see, because even our senses can deceive us, right? Our senses have been known over the years to deceive us. And that's why the Bible even says that the heart, above all things, is desperately wicked. And it went on to say, who can know it, right? We, even ourselves, we don't know if really what we see is what we see, or what we hear is what we hear. This is the level of the deception that we are actually living in right now. We are living in an age of deception. We are living in an age of deception, deception that is above, you know, any human comprehension. We only can tether ourselves, align ourselves to God's holy word, and the fact that he will give us the discernment, the discerning eyes that we need to be able to unmask the deceptions that are happening in our world at present. But let's continue to listen to some of the discussions about what the president, that's Joe Biden, has just said. All right, so let me see if I could put it back up here. Yeah, so let me share my screen with you. Give me a moment. Where is it? Yeah, so this is it. I'm going to share my screen with you again. All right, let us see what these journalists are saying. And this is CNN, by the way, this is not a station I normally listen to, but, you know, I saw it and I thought of sharing it with you.
Consider the policies with regard to children?
No. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you think the National Guard should intervene?
No.
Do you agree or not if students are calling for it?
All right, President Biden giving some comments about the unrest we've seen on college campuses, talking about how these protests bring at odds to important American principles. One, of course, the right of free speech to demonstrate peacefully, and the other one, of course, the right of students to feel safe and secure in an academic establishment. He did, on his way out of the room, also say that he didn't think the National Guard should be dispatched to college campuses, which, of course, has been going on in Texas, for one, as well as other law enforcement agencies in other states. Let's talk a bit about this before we go back to the Trump trial. Dana Bash, I know that there has been criticism of President Biden for waiting until today, quite late in all of this, to give a statement. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, we have heard from his spokespeople yesterday at the White House podium, and the deputy press secretary before that, since the unrest really started. But there have been calls, not just from his political opponents, but from his political supporters, to go out and to say something that gives clarity and a very solid argument for what is okay and what is not okay. And it's hard to imagine that anybody heard that and didn't hear a very, very clear argument that, as you said, Jake, you can be somebody who opposes any policy, and you should have the right. That is a fundamental right in the United States of America. But you can't intimidate. You can't do anything to stop people from going to classes or from feeling unsafe. And it is complicated. It is something that is steeped in nuance, but it's also something that a leader can and should, and I think probably in this case did, be able to clarify.
Now, just a second, do you think that we can live in a society, be it free or unfree, but we're talking about a free society in this context. Do you think we can live in a society in which you are not going to have some fear and people are not going to strike fear into your hearts, now and again? You and I went to school, we went to high school, we went to, elementary school, where sometimes we had bullets there. Sometimes even our teachers, right, struck fear into our hearts. So what sort of world do we think that we are trying to construct and to build? Do you think that it is possible to live in a world where in sometimes people are not going to strike fear into your hearts? They're not going to say things that cause you to fear. I don't think that that is possible. I really do not think that that is possible. Even going to church, right? Somebody might say something even from the Bible that causes you to fear, even though the Bible is against fear, because fear is not love and fear is not of God, right? But because we're living in a sinful world, people sometimes will respond to stimuli, right? Or to stimulus. And that is what happens. So I do not share her view here that, I believe that there should be nonviolence. I do not believe in violence by whatever means, all right? Even though sometimes violence might be something that you might have to do. Somebody attacks me, and you have to protect yourself. Sometimes you have to act violently, which is not, it should be the last resort. It should not be something that is fomented. But I do not think living in the world that we live, where we have, well, we say we claim that we practice pluralism in this pluralistic world, that you will not have the situations in which you are going to, be confronted with fear, right? And you will respond to that stimulus. And also that people will not say things that offend you. I think this lady here is being quite hypocritical as the journalist at CNN. What do I expect from them at CNN anyway? Their standards are quite low.
And make easier to understand for the American people. That's what a leader is supposed to do.
And let's also be clear, we went way past nuance, the violence that we've seen the last 2 days. I mean, and that is, I think, the distinction that President Biden was trying to make. I mean, breaking into the building at Columbia, the images that we saw out of UCLA, we were just showing some of them on the screens here. There have been all these conversations about these very, in many cases, terrible signs and messages that have been on these college campuses in terms of anti-Semitism, but the escalation in recent days.
I do not like the use of this word anti-Semitism. What does that word mean? And by the way, I'm not sure if you understand that on Wednesday in the House of Representatives, in the US House of Representatives, that a law was passed to, an anti-Semitism law was passed, which forbids any sort of discussion about Israel, including any criticisms, even if they're constructive criticism about Israel. Something that we have to think about. So we have to read. I think that Americans need to read. I don't think they will have the time to read because, as I said, it has passed the House of Representatives, and I think it's now going to be passed in the Senate. So Americans should have been asking that question long time ago. What does hate speech mean? And is hate speech a part of freedom of expression? Because I think it is. I think even though hate is a word, we don't like it, but it is a word, and we often use that word. I don't like, I hate this person, or I hate this religion. You have that right. Once you are not being violent, right? You are not expressing words of violence, then you should have rights to express your, discontent, right? Your feelings of, of hate, of loathing something, right? Of finding something reprehensible or repugnant, right? I think that all of that is within free speech. But again, we should not be condoning, as the president suggests, any sort of acts of vandalism and any acts of looting, something that we should unite against, because then we're going to create lawlessness in society.
Is clearly what motivated the president to come out now, even after, I will say, every morning I have gotten up looking at the previous day. What did the president say about this? Because I've been waking up and covering at 5 a.m. these protests breaking out on these college campuses. And the answer has always been, until this afternoon, well, no, here's some paper, here's some off-camera comments from the administration. Clearly, they felt like they needed to finally say something. And I think you could really hear, for President Biden, and Dana, you were talking about this as we listened to him, you could hear the conviction in his work.
What conviction is she talking about? What conviction is she talking about? There was absolutely no conviction in his voice. He was just reading from the script that they had given to him, right? His speech writer wrote for him. There was absolutely no conviction, because if there was any conviction, he would have stayed a few minutes and he would have answered the questions that the journalists were posing. But there was no conviction at all from Joe Biden. He's just doing the bidding of the office. That's exactly what he's doing. What is in this journalist's brain? I don't know.
Voice in the speech. Yep.
So when you were doing your show this morning, Casey, 5 a.m. East Coast time is 2 a.m. Pacific time, and it was at 1 a.m. Pacific time, I believe, that law enforcement went into the encampment at the campus of UCLA in Los Angeles to clear out the encampment there, which obviously is generally not a smooth and easy process. Josh Campbell is there, our law enforcement correspondent and a former FBI official, looking at well, that does not look ready for graduation. I'll just say that, Josh Campbell.
No, it certainly does. After that clash that we saw last night with law enforcement here, ultimately deciding that it was time to go in. They did this in steps. They issued an unlawful assembly order and then asked this crowd to disperse. And then they went in. The California Highway Patrol, there were some skirmishes. We talked to some of the officers inside who said that they had things that were thrown at them. I saw one officer who was covered in the powder from a fire extinguisher, but no injuries being reported at this point. We are learning, and I'll tell you as we kind of zoom in about what's left here.
I think I was distracted, but I'm not sure if the journalist, the CNN reporter, said that Josh is a former, a former employee of the FBI, right? I think he said that, but it's to show you how the secret agencies and the secret organizations work along with the media, right? They move along, so they would move from the CIA to the CNN, right? And back and forth. And that is how the media is controlled, right? Just wanted to say that, had to say that.
See behind me, there were 250 protesters approximately in this camp. That's what the CHP tells us. They brought in 250 officers of their own. So essentially one officer for one protester, bringing all of those individuals down. We are told that 132 of those protesters were taken into placed under arrest. We're waiting to see what those charges actually are. Now, overnight, we started to get a sense that this was about to go down because yesterday, this gets to, with the president's point about lawful versus unlawful. The university itself, up to the point of last night, didn't ask the police to come in and actually clear this camp. But that all changed. We started seeing resources come in. We saw the FBI field office, which is about a mile from here, essentially turn into a staging point for dozens and dozens of law enforcement officers. Multiple prisoner buses were brought in. And as you mentioned, Jay, just around 1 a.m. time, we are a little earlier than that, but that was the time when they actually made entry into the actual camp itself, going in, conducting those arrests. Right now, it is really quiet. What you're seeing, I don't know if you can see it in the background there, but a line of LAPD officers just showed up along with private security for the university here and essentially did a complete sweep. There were a few protesters that.
Yeah, so this is the militarization of the United States college campuses, right? I did tell you that that is the agenda, and that is what you're seeing unfolding. And they are talking using very wonderful words, right? That's law. And they're there to uphold the law, even though they're there to uphold the law according to their narratives, according to their perspectives, according to their philosophies, something that you have to understand. This is not protecting free speech, right? This is actually subverting it, restricting it, and suppressing it, and destroying it in the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is what is happening in the United States as we speak. I do not know what to say in terms of what the future of US college education is going to represent, is going to look like. What I do see is that the wrong precedence is being set as we see these things unfolding right before our eyes, right? It's time for us to get our acts together. It's time for us to understand that the Bible is true, right? No matter how much we try to, oppose its teachings and its philosophies, the truth contained in the Bible is relevant to our times, and that this lamb-like beast, known as the United States of America, is going to cause the entire world to wander after the beast, right? This United States is going to cause, and to cause there means to force, right? It's going to do it through enforcement, and it will say that it's upholding the law. It will say that it's creating law and order. It's trying to maintain law and order. And many of us, when we hear that, we will have no other means but to follow the diktats of the state. But you have to be brave, right? And if you're brave, you will say that, no, I rather, right, obey God rather than men. All right, so all of these theories that we're learning at universities, we're realizing that they have no power over even this gigantic military apparatus in the United States. So right now, even the professors who are there, right, who think that they're revolutionary, right, there's nothing that they can do. No man will be able to oppose the draconic laws and the draconic, what should I say now, enactments of men when that time comes. And we can see that that time is fast approaching. We're fast approaching the day of tyranny, right? Of authoritarian governance. And the United States is no different. So if you think that you're living in the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? I will say to you that you need to take advantage of the freedoms that are still remaining, but do not sit on your high horses pretending that you're living in a free country and you have all the rights that you think the Constitution gives to you, right? It's not true, right? And you have to see that every day those rights are being restricted, being subverted, and they're being eradicated. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Thank you so much for joining. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please remember to like and to share and to subscribe. And we'll see each other when we will talk about another important topical matter. So long. All the best. Bye.